This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you been thinking about therapy? Have you been trying to get in to see a therapist? Have you found that a lot of therapists that you've been recommended to have either closed books or they've got a really long waiting list? Sometimes months. If you're lucky, it's a couple of weeks. Now, what if there was an alternative that gave you quicker access and at your convenience? So when starting to think about looking for a therapist, try BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient and flexible to your schedule needs. So just fill out the brief questionnaire and get matched with a registered therapist. You can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So get moving with therapy and visit BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/Gunter today will give you 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gunter, Gunter.
Listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and today what I want to do is dissect the myth of Stoicism in masculinity and offer you a critique of how its modern interpretation impacts men's emotional health. I also want to aim to unravel some of the complexities in Stoicism and thereby differentiate the ancient philosophy from the contemporary and unfortunately often misapplication that leads to men suppressing emotional expression. So let's dive into a balanced exploration and critique of Stoicism so that we can understand its essence and really reimagine its role in modern masculinity. So the modern myth fundamentally equates Stoicism with emotional suppression, which is in fact actually a stark departure from its philosophical roots. And this interpretation encourages men to hide their vulnerabilities, perpetuating the belief that emotional restraint is in fact a hallmark of strength. Okay, so the idea is that, by holding emotion in, we become stronger. Unfortunately, this neglects the Stoic teachings on emotional intelligence and the importance of acknowledging the internal experience. So critically, the misinterpretation fails to distinguish between suppressing emotions and managing emotional reactions. While Stoicism teaches the latter, contemporary society often champions the former, leading, at least very much so for men, detrimental effects on our health, our mental health, and on our interpersonal relationships. So let me tackle Stoicism from its foundation. Stoic philosophy, at its core, actually encourages resilience and emotional regulation, not indifference. And there is a vast difference between the two. However, critics argue that its emphasis on self-control and detachment can lead to emotional isolation, potentially stifling empathy and compassion, qualities which are fundamentally essential for meaningful human connections. But I would argue that that's taking a lot of Stoicism out of context. Now, the other bit is Stoicism focuses on accepting things as they are. And it might unfortunately encourage some inadvertently to discourage individuals from striving to change unjust situations and potentially fostering complacency in the face of social wrongs. Okay, so you just put up with things, you go along with them, you don't challenge them. Okay, so does that leave room for social action, activism, the challenge of status quo? So one of the things I want to encourage is a deep critical thinking process around Stoicism. Because in my view, understanding and critiquing Stoicism actually allows us to reinterpret it in a beneficial way. True Stoicism involves a deep engagement with our emotions, recognizing them without being overwhelmed by them. Now, this is a very nuanced approach, and in my view, actually enhances emotional literacy, not stifle it. So let me give you an example of that. For a lot of people, one of the things that they experience is an overwhelm of feeling. Right? And in many respects, a lot of people don't feel that they have any real agency over what they're feeling. So they need to ride out the emotion in a way that, or challenge it, or force it into a box and putting it away. Now, one of the things that I'll point out is that most emotions are temporary. They come, they rise, they peak, and then they fall off. And this is where the idea of riding it out is actually the healthier one. But it also means that in many respects, I can have a greater sense of agency over my emotions. And quite simply, the way that I can do that is by acknowledging what I'm feeling, validating it, and then looking at what I'm going to do, if anything, with those emotions. Does that make sense? Think about it. Think about it last time you were anxious. You might have been going into an interview, into an exam. Now, my argument is anyone who isn't apprehensive in those sort of situations maybe needs to look a little bit for a pulse. My view about this is that we want to be able to differentiate apprehension from anxiety. Anxiety is a greater state. It's got a lot more emotional oomph and physical sensations attached to it. Apprehension is at a lower level. So let me ask you this. How can you go from anxiety to apprehension? So we're looking at a lower level emotional reaction or response, okay? What I encourage people generally to do is actually quite simple. In that state where you are beginning to recognize that you are more than simply apprehensive, that is, that you're anxious, first step to take is to go, stop. In your mind, if you're on your own, say it out aloud, and then take a deep breath in as far as you can. I usually talk about 5 seconds. Hold it for 5 seconds and slowly breathe out for 5 seconds. And on the breath out, you acknowledge what you're feeling. Yes, I'm feeling anxious. Then you reassure yourself. And that's okay. In other words, you're saying, I can cope with this. Rather than often what we do is we tell ourselves that I can't cope with it. Okay, because all that's going to do is now make you more anxious. So you might have been anxious about something, but now you're anxious about being anxious. It's called symptom anxiety. So I can then introduce another step if I've got the time and the place. Examine what is it that I'm telling myself that has led me from feeling apprehensive to feeling anxious. Well, let's take an exam situation, for example, or a job interview. With the exam, I know I'm going to fail this. With the job interview, I'm never going to get that job. Now, in both instances, I can challenge those thoughts quite readily. How do I know? Well, you don't. So the idea is to bring yourself back into the moment. Now, that's not being stoically out of touch with your feelings. It's actually being emotionally literate. This situation has allowed me to improve my sense of agency over myself. In this particular instance, it's over my emotions. I'm not cut off from my emotions by any means. I'm still in touch with them. But I have the capacity through my emotional literacy and my understanding my emotional vocabulary to begin to change my experience of what it is that I'm feeling. In this case, I'm going from anxiety to apprehension. Now, that might take some practice. No one's perfect. We all are going to need to spend a little bit of time getting this under our belt. So in many respects, I'm still using in some ways a stoic approach, right? I mean, one of the things that sometimes I jokingly say to myself if I'm a bit anxious, well, it's not going to kill me, okay? In most cases, that's absolutely fundamentally true. Right? I'm not going to address issues where that might not be the case. That's for a different podcast altogether. So what I want to get to is that whole way of using a philosophy like Stoicism, or I could even talk about Zen, in a way that allows me to use it beneficially. As I said before, there's some good stuff in this, but if it's going to create, a situation where I'm training myself to be unfeeling, to be rigid, to be inflexible, I'm not going to encourage resilience, because emotional literacy and the way that I can apply Stoicism is going to make me more self-aware. It's going to make me more flexible. Therefore, I'm going to be able to be a lot more adaptable. And that is going to lead me to feeling resilient. I can cope rather than I'm not going to be able to cope. So the real challenge lies in redefining Stoic virtues in a way that promotes emotional well-being. That's the key message I want to give everybody. This means that we see resilience not as the absence of emotion, but as the strength to face and express those emotions constructively. It's about transforming Stoic silence into reflective introspection and open communication. I'm going to be speaking about what I feel in a logical, rational, and objective way. Not in a detached way, not in an, sort of airy-fairy way where, it's either all pie in the sky or it's just terrible. So as we come to the close of this podcast, I want us to think about creating a relationship with Stoicism that, when we really understand it in its depth, offers valuable lessons on how I deal with myself within the context of the world. And that has to be balanced with emotional openness. So if you are going to embrace Stoicism, it's absolutely fundamentally important that you acknowledge emotions as an integral part to our humanity. And it's essential for true resilience. So let me lay down a bit of a challenge. So go away. There's lots of stuff on the internet about Stoicism. There's a podcast called The Daily Stoic. A lot of that stuff's fantastic. It's really good. Okay? You may disagree with some of it. That's fine, as long as you've critically thought it through and understand how you could maybe apply it, or not, if that's what you choose to do. But in my view, a lot of therapies are based on lots of elements out of Stoic philosophy, out of humanistic existential philosophy, and so on. Even Zen comes into play. a lot in psychotherapy. So embrace the strength in vulnerability and the wisdom in emotional expression. And in that, let's inspire a change towards a more emotionally literate and resilient form of masculinity. And let me invite women to consider that as well in their realm of being. So let me thank you for joining again this particular part of the journey on Inspire Change with me. I want to invite you again together to continue to challenge misconceptions and grow in our understanding of what it means to be truly strong, resilient. Now, until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and embrace the full spectrum of your emotions and learn to regulate them so as they're not toxic to others or destructive to yourself. So this is me signing off. Stay inspired, and remember, the path to change is paved with introspection and authenticity. Get ready for a journey into the heart of storytelling on Inspire Change with Gunter. What am I talking about? Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Karen Sander from the Storyroom to come onto the program to explore how stories shape us and the world around us. Karen's insights into the power of narratives to foster empathy and inspire change are simply not to be missed. Whether you're a storyteller at heart or just discovering your story, this episode will open new doors. So join us for this special 50-minute interview and let's unlock the transformative power of storytelling together. Tune in to Inspire Change with Gunter with our guest Karen Sander. Change your story and change your life. See you there.
This is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.